A very good evening to everyone. This is Shashwat DC from Azim Premji University, and we are back again with another edition of Nature Writing for Children webinar series brought to you by the university as part of its Seeking Sustainability initiative. Uh, Yesterday, as I announced, we had Ranjit Jadhav, who is a journalist, as our guest for one of our talks for our Nature in our City series, and now we have the famous author Ranjit Lal, who has written plethora of books, almost 45 books, fiction, non-fiction, talking about various aspects of nature, animal, wildlife, and how we coexist with them. So he has been a prolific author for all these years. He has been a journalist who has been writing regular columns in Indian Express and all. And he's also, he has written books. The one that we are taking on today, the Tigers. This one is the parakeet that squawked English. This is Tigers of the Taboo Valley that we are talking about today. So with that, welcome on board, Ranjit. It's a great pleasure to have you for our series. Yeah. So, Ranjit, to just start off our discussion, you started writing way back in 1996, right? I remember, if I recall correctly. At that time, nature writing per se was not, nothing very interesting about it. Nature was just something that we took granted for. Uh, so, how was there a conscious choice to write on topics that related to environment and nature, or it just happened quite naturally to you?
Hello?
Yeah,
No, that sort of goes up. Yeah.
yeah. So I was saying,
I
when you
didn't
started
get the
writing,
question. It sort of was loading,
yeah, okay. So
freezing
is
up.
it
Yeah.
fine now?
Yeah. It's better
Can
now.
you hear
Yeah.
me? Yeah. So I was just saying, Ranjit, when you started writing on books, right, in your first one, the Crow Chronicles in 1996, when it was published, at that time,
Yeah.
writing on nature was not something that was very fascinating, considering that we were not very conscious about, the importance of nature per se. So how was it a conscious choice with you to take up this genre, or it just so happened?
Well, I was always interested in nature. I mean, right from childhood, one spent more time outdoors than indoors. So, I mean, one knew nothing. I mean, because, we didn't have Google or anything like that. So you couldn't dial in anything and get your answers. But it was just looking at things that are living, living. And we knew, I mean, we used to climb trees, and you knew which ant would bite you and which ant would not bite you because from personal experience. And that's how you learned. And that interest in other living creatures was always there. And then it took off with birds. I mean, initially, again, birds was not very, I never was very interested. But then somebody said, you get a pair of binoculars and look at them. And I did that. And this was, we were living in Bombay. And the first bird that I saw through these nice, big, powerful, brand new binoculars was the coppersmith barbet, which has a face like a clown. So I thought to myself that if the very first bird that I read looks like a clown, what are the other 1,300 ones? What do they look like? Are they also clowns? So that kicked off the whole interest in all that. And then the more you read about, you read up more about them, and you read about even about insects. They're fascinating. I mean, I think we underestimate insects quite a bit because I've seen there's almost an intelligence that works in the way they sort of function. So all these things are and they are technically, I mean, way above us. I mean, we don't know how to use such spiders. We use 7 varieties for different purposes, and we are still busy. And so, I mean, it's a huge, fascinating world that I think so many people just ignore. It's appalling because you're missing out so much of life. You're missing out 90% of what's interesting in life. And then the stories followed.
Yeah, and keeping in mind also the fact that in current times how important of late environment and nature has become a very important topic, considering the kind of challenges that we are facing due to climate change and global warming and others. How important do you think it is to involve children into these discussions, and what will be the ideal way to do so?
It is very important to involve children, and the best way, to my mind, is not to make it a doomsday scenario, to paint a doomsday scenario all the time, because anybody will lose interest after a while. If it's just doom and gloom, then what's the point of it? You have to bring out the wonder, the amazement that lies within nature, and the fact that it's all these other creatures that are really running the world, the planet, and not us and our stock market and all that bullshit. Because that is not. Because you cannot eat money. You cannot eat money. No matter how much of it you have, you cannot put it in your mouth and eat it. You need, I mean, you need nature to support that whole system. And it's so brilliantly sort of organized. The leaves produce oxygen, which you need, and they absorb carbon, which you don't need too much of, which we are producing too much of. And we're just cutting off the branch on which we are sitting rapidly. But when you write stories, then you can't make it a complete doomsday scenario, because, as I said, then people will just lose interest and they say, no, this is that. I mean, I get 3 newspapers in the morning every day, and sometimes I wonder, why the hell do I do that? Because all it does is depresses you. So it's that you have to have a positive outlook. There has to be some light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that holds good for not only for nature writing, but for any kind of writing, at least to my mind. If everybody's going to die at the end, then what's the point of the story?
True. And if I were to ask you, you have written books on what you call as fiction and non-fiction. Which, for you, is your favorite choice of writing? Which books do you prefer? And even when you are writing fiction, most of your books include tidbits and information. How do you go about collecting and integrating them in your books as well?
Well, actually, a lot of fiction arises out of non-fiction. Because for example, with birds and all that, you observe they behave, you've written about how they behave, and then you create a story. Like I think, the parakeet that spoke in English, there's that story about that magpie robin that was singing. Now that I actually observed that in Goa, actually happening, and I've written articles about that, how I heard this bird singing 4 o'clock in the morning, and closing hours, you want to sleep and all that, but it sings so beautifully you can't ignore it. That was, singing. That's what I thought. So I said, Jugalbandi ho gaya. It's a competition. And then I looked in the garden and saw that there was only one pair there. So I said, what is happening? And then later on in a book, I read that sometimes these male birds that sing to declare their territory and to attract a mate pretend to be different birds from the same area, general area, so that any outside will think that there are 2 or 3 males here. So if I am to come here, I'll have to fight 2 or 3 of them. And that's not worth it, because I'll get hurt, and then that's the end of the matter. So he won't come. So that's how he deceives it. And he can tell his girlfriend that, look, I've got this huge area. It's all mine. So you come in, and in Goa, it was 3 buildings and a swimming pool and flower beds and the works. So that then you convert into a story, which is what I did in the parakeet that squawked in English, where there's this bird Mozart, the magpie robin that sings, and he sings very well. And this girl comes in and she looks around quite interested. So he says, "Why don't you stay with me and all that?" Then, no, just wait for one night. I'll pick up my mind. So he gets scared and he sings two songs. And she comes back the following day and she asks, she's looking around distractedly and all that. And she says, "Is anything the matter? Can I get you a worm, or are you feeling all right?" And then she sort of says that, "Yeah, I know you sing very beautifully, but today I heard another magpie area, a much more beautiful song. I want to find him." And she goes, so in his being very clever, he has lost out. That's how you create the story. Similarly with Caterpillar, who went on a diet. Caterpillar go on a diet. That was the challenge. So that the stories that follow from there. But it's all followed from actual facts, actual things that happen. So
And
you've got to observe. First, you've got to observe then you create the fiction out of that.
Yeah. And you, during these COVID times, you also wrote something very, the birds outside the window, outside my window, which was, your
Pardon?
observations about, you wrote also the book, The Birds Outside My Window, right? Where you have
That I
spoken
wrote a
about,
long time ago. Edition that has come out from, I think, Scholastic, Tulika from Chennai. They had published this in 2003 or 4 or something like that, a long time ago. And this
okay.
was actually set in whatever window, veranda, wherever you were, in whichever part of it could have been also in a hill station that I've described what happened. So it just shows that you don't have to go tramping huge distances or hiking or going mountains to find birds. They're everywhere, and they remind you of things. Jungle babblers. They remind me of cops. Khaki mein, they're wearing khaki. They've got this glowering expression. Always, fluffed up feathers. Their tails swing like lathis and all that. And yet, actually, secretly, they're very sweet birds because what they love doing is nuzzling up to each other in a whole bunch, 6 or 7 of them, and preening each other. And they'll have this glowering and yet blissful expression on their face, while they're doing it. So you wonder that it's not they're like angry birds otherwise. So I sort of keep thinking that maybe if cops did this to each other in their morning parade before they went out on their duties, they'd be more human than they are. So it reminds you of people and the way people behave and things like that. So that's the fun part of it.
Yeah. So you spoke about how you integrate the real world into, and use it as a as a launch board for most of your things. So let's come to this book. The Tigers of the Taboo Valley. So if you were to describe for me,
Yeah.
how was the genesis of the book? What was the process? What inspired you? And how much time really it took you to put this book together?
Well, this book came out of a reaction to a news report in one of the papers, in which they had observed that actually in Ranthambore there was a male tiger that had started looking after its cubs after the mother of the cubs died. And so I sort of latched on to that, and then linked it up with all the other, the patriarchal society syndrome and all that. And I said, there's a perfect story over here. And to get some excitement, then of course I introduced the porcupines, which I had service to, because they turned out to be the terrorists, the Kujlimal and the works,
The
what was that,
Alsi
Colonel
Kebab
Colonels or
Atankagal.
whatever he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the terrorist organization getting after them. But that again was because the porcupines, if their quills are embedded in a tiger, the tiger does turn, cannot hunt. And that does, make it become a man eater because we are the easiest to kill. So, I mean, that was their deep rooted thinking. And then, of course, there was all this thing about honor, the so-called honor that we talk on about. So that was how that story sort of came about, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I enjoyed it. It was great fun. It must have taken about 3 or 4 months to write, and it was good fun. It was really enjoyable
Yeah.
plotting it
And
all
there was,
and all the rest of it. It was, and then there was the
yeah,
vultures.
yeah, the vultures were, and that's where I also
The
come.
little
You have this thing about, you spoke about the diclofenac issue that was there, the poisoning that was there, and you used it
yeah,
very, subtly,
yeah,
including that thing in your. So that's what even in your book, The Rumble in the Jungle, you speak about how animals suffer in zoo and all these things, those kind of things. So
yeah.
throughout your, while these animals are talking, while they have these very humanistic kind of outlook, but you kind of integrate what their suffering or their things are.
Yeah, well, actually, in Rumble in the Jungle, that tradition that I've described, the Tarpan, it actually was true. It was based, it started off in Rajasthan, then went off to Nepal, where the king has to sort of kill a rhino and get inside the carcass and cover himself with the blood, and it ensures the purity, the sanctity of his ancestors, etc., etc. So it is based on actual, tradition and fact. And of course, there's the poaching aspect also. And I find rhinos are, they're quite irresistible. They run so beautifully. They're so light on their feet because they're related to horses. They have the same sort of thing, and that's why it's so that's sort of worked out also. I enjoyed that, and the way they are caught and killed, for their horns, the traps that are set and all that are just horrifying.
Yeah, and there was also very interesting descriptions, I would say, in your, especially the tigers in the Taboo Valley. One thing was there, you were the raven-haired National Geographic reporter was there. Then there was this Khoon Ka
Okay.
Pyasa. So how do you come with all these,
Yeah.
interesting names of all these characters that inhabit your book?
The names just come. They just come by themselves. I don't know how, but it just happens that way. And I don't have to think too hard. The harder you think, the worse. The, for every action, there's equal reaction. Think the more there's going to be resistance against it. You just go to sleep, and the next morning, everything is quite clear. So I mean, that's how I sort of try to work out, and the names just come. I mean, for a poacher, what could be better than Khoon Pyasa? He is bloodthirsty. That's all, you know. So, and for the porcupine, I mean, what better nickname can you have than Colonel Cuddles? Would you like to cuddle a porcupine? So, I mean, it's great fun to wake up these sort of names.
Yeah. So and also the fact that even so when you're talking about all these animals and all these things, there's certain empathy that is very striking in your work. That the role that humans kind of play in this how should I say it? The balance that is not really there. So how do you include humans, and what is your purview of including humans into your work, where animals and all are these talking as well?
Well, you have to have sort of that empathy, you know, that you have to also feel that, okay, now if this animal were a thinking and feeling being, which it probably is more and more being discovered to be that, how would they feel? And you just transpose that, and of course your characters have to have that initial that empathy with them, like the little girl in the rhino story, and even the photographer in Tigers of Taboo Valley. So they have that empathy. I think all children have it. It's just that it's the adults that say, kutta kaatega. Instead of try to make friends with the dog or whatever, the first reaction is kutta kaatega. I remember we used to keep dogs, and I broke out a little boxer puppy. He was about that big, and I took him out in the big lawn and all that, and the children were playing and all that. They and their nannies fled. Kutta, kutta, kutta kaatega, kutta kaatega. And this guy was this big. And then they saw, how small he was. And then slowly they came back and they played with him for 1 hour. So, it's just the attitude that needs to be changed. And yes, you have to train children that this is how you behave around animals. You cannot, pull their ears and pull their tails. They will react. So you have to teach your children that this is what animals are. This is how you play with them or deal with them. And children have that natural empathy, I think, with all living things.
Okay. And also, if I were to ask you, what comes first for you? When you're writing a book like, say, Tigers in the Taboo Valley or Rumble in the Jungle, is it the plot that comes first for you, or is it the characters that you build and then you weave the narrative? How dynamic is your writing process for that matter?
I mean, I must know exactly what I want to write about. Like in Tigers of Taboo Valley, it was the very fact that this male macho tiger was looking after its little one was the central pivot around which that story went. And then, okay, now if this were to happen, what would the rest of society think of that this guy is looking after his bachas, his mother's call us, come on, do this. So then the story then expands. Then you bring in your porcupines also, add a little to it, and then the story takes off. And of course, at the end of a chapter, your characters are in such a mess that you wonder now, how the hell am I going to get them out of this situation? You go to sleep, and the next morning, the sleep is there for you. Where you say, okay, this is the way to do it. Yeah. So I mean, that's how I sort of generally sort of do it. But I think all kids have this natural interest and empathy in other living sort of creatures. I just hope that empathy is not being eroded into now empathy for your smartphone and your gadgets instead of real living things.
Yeah. And how do you react to this thing that people say that kids are not reading as much, and their attention span is very limited.
Well, it's strange because
You
every
have to.
school principal I talk to says that kids are reading. I mean, the publishers will say no, they're not. Booksellers will say no, they're not. So you don't know. I mean, where exactly the situation. There are a lot of children that read a hell of a lot. I mean, there was one little girl who came up to me and said, there was this book I'd written, Our Nana is a Nutcase. She said, I've read it 7 times. So I said, wow, you should try something also. But so some kids, it's the parents. It's the parents must be the catalysts. In the parents and school. These, and unfortunately, our education system is just torturous. No child will want to look at a book after school, certainly. And in our time, we had library people. We used to take books on our own. We used to crowd the library without being told that you have to go and read this book and write a report on it or whatever. Go and read whatever you like. So it's the parents that, and both my parents used to read. At that time, again, it was easier because there was hardly any TV and no other distractions. So it was easy for us to habit. But that habit has to be formed. Parents have to read
So
out
when
to
you write
when
these
they're
books,
very small.
sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Go
So I'm
ahead.
saying when you write these books, how do you balance the need to educate to that to entertain? Keep those kids hooked along.
Because you should picture them. That this you do all your characters. They should be the ones who are educating each other and the reader perhaps. So, for example, you have a character who's sort of intellectual, say, than the other, and loves using large logos. You can always solve the problem by having other characters in the book. What the hell are you gassing about? Explain. So the fellow has to explain. And in that, you've given the meaning of that word, which the child otherwise would not have understood. So you let your characters do all the talking and the explaining rather than doing it yourself as a big author. Sitting there like lecturing, because kids do not like morals. You should, I mean, every story, of course, is always good versus evil, and good usually comes on top. But you should also leave an open space so that the child can make its mind that this is the right thing and this is the wrong thing. So without saying that this is the moral of the story, cheaters never prosper. It comes out in the story itself.
Yes. Yeah. That is an interesting thing. And one thing that I've heard some of your talks as well, you have a very detailed and a structured, disciplined writing process. If you could just, that was very
Oh yeah,
interesting
I
that
mean,
you.
9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in front of the computer writing. So from 9 to about 12:31, you're working. It could be either researching for an article or for a book, or actually doing the writing. So by that 12:31, your brains are scrambled. So you're not good for anything else, but maybe doing email and reading the newspapers and things like that. But nine from 9 to 1, you just do that. And you again, I get you get used to initially when I started writing, I said I'm writing a book and I must not be disturbed and things like that. In India, that does not work. The bell will ring, the dhobi will come, the bhajiwala will come, someone will want something, and you should not allow that to get your goat, because that spoils the mood. There's no point. You can't fight it. You just have to deal with it. You take the phone call and deal with it and get going again after that. No, you're not going to. The world's not going to end if you do that. But from 9 to 1, I generally am writing, and now I find that I'm not disturbed so much because people know that this is what you're doing, and it's better to sort of not that I'm going to snap at them or anything like that, but they do see that you are being interrupted in something that you are doing. So, but there's no point making a song and dance about it. So
And
that I do. That is some days when the book is going strong, then you're working the whole day. If you might produce 3,000 a day, but then it's like doing a complete workout, because then for the next 2 days you can't do anything. You can't write. You are so exhausted. Your brains are totally scrambled and you can't do anything more. But then you go through what you've written and then sort it out.
yeah, and do you suffer from writer's block, as they call it?
Well, I generally have 2 or 3 different things going at the same time. So if one doesn't seem to be working out, I put that on a backbench, take out on the backbench, and take out something else and do. Like right now, for instance, I had started a story which I haven't thought through properly. So it's come to a grinding halt. So as I said, we just put this on the back burner for a while. And I'm also working on a book on cars because I'm interested in automobiles. I'm doing a book on that. So I need to do research and all that for that and writing it up. So I'm doing that. So that's fine. I think in the background, this other story will be working its way out, and something will finally emerge. And it's amazing. You might just read something in the newspaper verse for that story, and then you can pick it up from there and continue. So I have something or the other going in these columns. I have to do once a week anyway. So you're already thinking, 2 weeks ahead now. What are you going to write about? What is interesting? What is not? So you have to keep thinking all the time. It's a 24/7 kind of a job occupation.
Yeah, that's interesting, because what you're emphasizing is the discipline that is required to be,
Yeah, you need that. I keep telling kids that you just sit down and write. If there's nothing else, just keep a diary or keep a journal. What did you do today? Now everybody's on Facebook and all that bullshit. But you just, if you can. My first book, Crow Chronicles, was written in pencil. It was about 600 pages of foolscap thing penciled out. Then I typed that out and put it on paper. And that again gave me a discipline. Because, those huge, heavy typewriters were like driving a lorry. So you type it out and then you correct that. And my thing was, I am going to retype it just once. So the second copy is going to be the final copy. I am not going to retype it third time. So edit it once, and that then becomes a discipline in your rewriting. These days, it's so easy to write on computer, which I was nervous about. That laptop will just disappear somewhere, and that's it. You can't get it back. So that discipline to you write properly the first or second time. Don't keep going over and over and over.
Yeah. So, if I were to ask you, say the first, the Crow Chronicles, that was there, the first book, how much time did it take you to complete that book, and get it published also? And
And that was
typically
this
most
was
of
the
the,
first book I was sort of. One of my
yeah,
father's friends said, "Why don't you write a book?" Okay, what about? I thought about going around in my head. Okay, I write this birds in Bharatpur and all. Started, and of course, being we thought that if you wrote 1 page a day, that was a hell of a lot, and all the rest of it. And so it meandered around for about 2 years, and I'd finished about 1/3 of that book. And then I got fed up one day. I said that either you drop it or you finish it. And the rest of the 2/3 of the book was done in 6 months, flat out. And I really sort of did nothing else, just wrote that and finished it and typed it out and took it off to Penguin. So, and now it takes an average of about, I think, 4 months or 3 to 4 months between the initial idea and the completion. 4 to 5 months. That's what it takes.
And tell me one thing, most of the authors have these very interesting stories of how their manuscript they had was not it was rejected, and they didn't the publishers didn't like it. Have you ever faced those kind of things in your long
Yeah,
writing
but
career as
I
well?
mean, I get rejections. You get rejections all the time. I have a pile of unpublished stuff lying around, which I've got an agent now, so she's sort of trying to distribute stuff around. But what is interesting with these publishers is, it's not the editors that make up their mind whether they want to publish a book or not. It's the marketing, which according to me is completely wrong, because marketing's job is to sell what they are told to sold. What they're given. I give them a donkey, it's their job to sell the damn donkey. They are not to decide, no, I want a racehorse instead. But unfortunately, that's what's happening in publishing houses. It's the marketing team that makes up its mind or gives the approval that yes, you can take this book up or not. But it's the same thing it's a battle like between literature and pulp fiction. They want something that will sell, and it need not be good. So that is one of the very sad things and all publishers are doing that. All these big publishers are doing that, which is it's a sad thing. But I mean, you've got to sort of then when you're writing, you've got to think about, okay, now what do you think these fellows will be looking for, or whatever it is. But that's not the way. Then it affects you as a writer.
Okay. There's one question which is very there in lots of people's mind, and they keep asking us also is, can you make a living as a writer in India specifically, and writing the kind of books, children books that you do?
It it's better not to try. It's better to have a job on the side and do this, and then if this thing takes off, then you can give up that job and continue with this. But otherwise, it's very difficult because they don't. I mean, publishers don't pay. They pay peanuts completely. It's your advances and all that are complete peanuts. So at least in India, unfortunately, the readership is maybe not as big as because publishing for children is a massive industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's huge. We are nowhere near that. We are absolutely nowhere. There must be what 100 people also writing for children in India today. I don't think there are more than that. And I mean, when you go to one of these festivals and all, you know everybody because there's so few. You know everybody. So it's sad in that sense. But we have a long way to run. Publishers they don't pay too much. They're quite sort of. So it's better to keep it as a it's a paying hobby of that kind.
Yeah. In your case, you have been writing for, as a writer, you have been like newspaper and all this. So that is, I think, so an
Yeah,
alternative career.
that supplements. Yeah, and now there's all these other stuff on online material also, which you can contribute to or whatever. So you can adds up a bit and bit. But your royalties from your book, you think of that as a bonus. For me, the way I look at writing is that so you have spent 6 months of your life doing something you absolutely love doing. You are one person who can't wait to get to their desk 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock Monday morning. How many people in this world can think of that? Can take, have you seen the way, I mean, what people look like when they're going to office on Monday mornings? The expression of their faces. And you can't wait to get to your table to start working. And of course, you have no commute. My commute is 2 seconds from my bed to the desktop. Spend so much of your life doing something you love doing. Whatever after that is you treat it as a big bonus. That's the way you can sort of look at it. And that's the way I try to sort of look at it. That, okay, you said you had a good time. How many people have had a good time? I mean, from Monday to Friday they're working. Nowadays maybe less, but still. And I have no boss to report to. No, I mean, boss to tell me this is wrong and that is wrong, and do this and do that and all the rest of it. Nothing like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of it,
So that's the
the
fun part
rest
of
of
it.
it. Yeah, how fun you have writing. You also have a very unique home that you live in, right? It's right next to a cemetery for that matter. And Yeah,
Yeah,
tell
so
us
that's
about.
again the source of a lot of stories. Well, it's the old Nicholson Cemetery. It's because, when the 1857 rebellion happened, a lot of the fighting was from this area into Kashmiri Gate. When the Brits came, they camped, they put all their guns where I'm living now, and they bombarded Kashmiri Gate. And the guy who was leading the charge was this completely obnoxious Colonel Nicholson, who was he was a brutal man. He would put prisoners in the muzzle of the cannons and fire it to blow the fellow up as a way of punishment. So he was leading this charge, and he went into Kashmiri Gate, and he was shot by a sniper. So he was then brought and buried over here. It took two days to die, which I think he deserved perhaps. So he was buried in the cemetery over here. And then, I mean, I've been there, I've roamed around there. But what's sad is a lot of them are civilians, Indians as well as British, but all very young, 40s. And they all died, I think, of heat stroke and cholera and malaria and stuff like that. And even the rebellion, I think more soldiers died out of illness, cholera and things like that, because it was in May, June. The monsoons had come and the ridge was absolutely flooded and full of mud and mosquitoes. So more casualties were caused by illness and all that than by gunfire. So it's quite an interesting sort of, it's an old ancient, it's I think controlled by some church, St. Stephen's Church nearby, St. James's Church nearby. And unfortunately, in the early 90s, they cut all it was like a forest. You couldn't imagine that there was a road beyond it, main road. And early 90s, they cut all the trees. And I had a fight with the people who were organizing that. Why are you doing this? You don't know how expensive it is to maintain a cemetery. I was like, I mean, come on. Then I asked the woodcutters, why are you chopping them? It's all rotten wood. And then there I saw the wood being taken. What are you going to do with it? You keep it in a go down. Rotting wood in a go down. Are you rearing termites? So, I mean, it was just to make money. Now they haven't touched it for a while, so it's come back and it's looking better. But I used to do a lot of my bird watching from here. It's just outside, behind the window there. You can see.
Yeah, that's also Ranjit. It reminds me. I remember in back in Mumbai, in the old part of the town, the Kolaba. There are these old, I think, so the Afghan church or some
Yeah,
church that is there, which has similar
yeah,
symmetry and it has all the old. So one of my favorite things used to be to read those tombstones. They were such
yeah,
fascinating
yeah.
stories. So have you
I
done
know.
that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen them, but I haven't sort of got a story out of them or anything like that. But I do remember. I mean, I haven't been there for many years now, but I do remember, people dying young women, probably in childbirth or whatever, with a baby or something like that. There are lots of these sort of, you could say, tragic stories that are lying underground over there. So it's well, as I keep saying, I have cat neighbors. So, but it's sort of. It's a strange, and they're young. That's the thing, that there's hardly anybody who's in the 80s or 90s or anything like that. And there are a few soldiers, those British soldiers who shot. Some of them are there.
Yeah, true. Okay, now you have this unique thing that you were born in Calcutta and you spent time in Madras or Chennai as we call it now. Then you
Yeah,
shifted, you studied in Mumbai, and finally, so you've completed the golden quadrilateral as we call it, right? So,
yeah,
which
yeah.
which of the cities have had a very great influence on you and your writings
Pardon?
and
You frozen up?
yeah. So I was asking
Uh,
among these four cities. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yeah, among these four cities, which of these
Which city
have
I
a,
like the best?
yeah, like the best or has an
Have them.
influence on your writing?
Well, Calcutta, I was only born in. Never really lived there. Then we went for a few years. I must have been about 4 or 5. Then we went to Madras, and that was where this interest in nature was sparked, because there was a enormous garden, huge estate, where we were allowed to run around free. It was walled in. Parents were not afraid that you could get out of the road or anything like that. So the whole day was One was growth trees, running around, fishing in a pond, fishing in a well, things like that. Was inculcated, and then we went to Bombay, 8 or 9 or 10 at that time. School and college was done in Bombay. Bombay में we my father was with Burma Shell, so they had these shacks on Marway Beach where we used to, and that was again out. That time it was really deserted, so we used to roam around on the beaches all the whole weekend, and then there were hill station holidays and the lakes. We used to go to Borivali. College was St. Xavier's, and we used to bunk college and go to spend the day there in the monsoon because it used to be so lush and green and all that. Fictions. Sometimes we used to go early in the morning, 7 o'clock. We used to wake up the chowkidars at Kholo Darwaza, open the gate so that we could drive through. And so that's where that nature thing is sort of greenery and all that. But came to Delhi in 1980. But I still feel Bombay is home. When I go to Bombay, I still feel much more at home there than I do here in Delhi. I think Delhi is so scattered and spread out that it's going from one place to another. It's almost like going from one place to another instead of being in one town. So yeah, I've never got that feeling of in Bombay. You feel like the whole place is your home. Marine Drive and Kulaba area and all that area, South Bombay, Kumbala Hill, Malabar Hill, all that areas is like home. It still is when I go. So and the people, it's the people also. I didn't like the people over here when we came. I still have my reservations, but people in Delhi, they just people scowl rather than smile.
Interesting. So that's how most of your birds things do as well. So you are also a birder, right? And you have a fascination for a lot of these birds. But the interesting part is you have spoken about
Yeah, but I have,
birding bullies. You have spoken about there are these birders who are also kind of they behave
yeah,
in a certain fashion.
yeah. They are
So
characters like that also because normally talk about birds. They're very nice people, gentle people, sweet people. It need not be that way. They can be awful people also. And in fact, in one of my books, I think it's called Budgie, Vidge, and Big Jin. It's about a group of these these birder bullies. And some birders have that thing about them that always want to do a little list as long as possible. That we've seen more birds than you, as though they've invented that bird, whatever it is. If you had the opportunity, well and good. And if you want to go from one place to another 20 paces a day, fine, that's fine. But don't, it's no cap as such. It's okay. You can sit down in one day and watch one particular bird the whole day, and it'll teach you more than you would learn if you go around taking off 500, 200 species. So I mean, it's different for everybody. But then again, there are bird photographers which are offer. Some are offer because they will find a nest and they will take photographs of all that, then destroy it so that nobody else can do the same thing. So there are people like that also. So one needs to just be aware of that. That's all. Most
yeah.
birders are very nice people because they like spending time outside.
Yeah, yeah. No, there was this interview that we were doing, and there was this statement that had come from, I think, Ruskin Bond only had spoken about this, that bird watching is an essential part of learning to love nature, kind of thing. So, bird watching is a stepping stone towards learning to love nature. If when you start appreciating the birds and
Yeah,
the
it is
diversity that
definitely because one, it gets you out of the house. It gets you out of the house, and when you see birds, you see other things also, and you're out in the open and with nature, and it should pique your curiosity. Why is this bird behaving in the way it's behaving? Why is it not? And and again, you will find that with nature, a lot of these things they have as much of a ritual or as much of a routine as we have, as I have. You see the same bird in the same place doing the same thing year after year after year, and it's following some pattern. So it's not all random or anything like that. But you need that patience to observe it over that period of time.
Very interesting. And if I were to ask you, which are your favorite birds, or the birds that you like them for the unique traits, or like you mentioned magpie for that matter?
Yeah, I like my hero in Crow Chronicles, the Shikra, the small
Okay.
hawk, because I've seen it. It's about that big, and it's got these fierce. It's got a very fierce. It's a small thing, and I think there are a couple of them. There are a pair of them in the cemetery nesting, and you hear them. I've seen one take the myna. It's amazing how it comes out of the trees and bams into it and puts it down. And I like it because it's not huge. It doesn't have that, it's all brawn. It's well built, it's small, athletic, and fierce. So I like it, and I like my jungle babblers very much. They're hilarious. Anything to put a smile on your face, you look at them. The way they at each other and growl and hop and fluff up their feathers, and then they come knocking on the doors, on the glass door, in the morning. So I say, yeah, you come to see how many spiders that I've kept, and I haven't declared in my tax. So come and see it, search the house. Because, they like upturning all the leaves and all that. And the moment you go there, they run away. They fly away. So I said, okay. So you see, probably informed you that don't meddle with this guy. So you have fun with them. So parakeets are hilarious. They're absolutely hilarious. And in fact, I read a very interesting book called The Parrot in the Mirror, in which the author has said that we are the human equivalent of parrots. Or parrots are the human equivalent of, are the bird equivalents of us. Because they are as intelligent, they are long-lived, they have close family, social relationships. All the things that make us human, they have also in their country. So all these things make it so interesting.
Yeah. And you've also, besides, so if I were to ask you, besides the birds, which creatures, because I remember in one of our, when you had to come for one of our talks at the Azim, you have spoken about the need to observe a lot. And, you've given an example of the cockroach that was living at your house. So let me
Yeah,
start
you
with the
have to
cockroach
observe a
still
lot.
there.
You have, pardon?
Is the cockroach still living there, or it's
I don't get that.
now?
No, that cockroach disappeared because I'd gone off for a holiday, I think, to Goa. This was Diwali. He wasn't there when I came back, so I don't know what happened to him, where he went, and all that. But there was another very interesting episode that happened again in the bathroom. There was this spider that had built a sort of a web in a corner of the walls, between the corner of the walls, over here. And I used to wonder, why the hell is it built its trap over there? What's going to come? And it was the monsoon time, so we had a lot of these big black ants. Those black ants used to follow this wall along that corner and walk along. And this guy used to be this spider. She used to be waiting over there. And the moment they turned the corner, she got him. And over a period of weeks, she got 7 of those big ants. Her web was littered with these huge ants. So she knew exactly where to build her web because she'd observed or whatever, noticed that these ants are using this route and this web and catch them. So there's a hell of an intelligence going on there. And on the other hand, again with ants, again in the bathroom, there was this, I had a soap dish. And one morning I went a big black ant going round and round that soap dish. So I said, okay, she's getting a morning walk. Take care, even I know that. And 7 o'clock she was doing that, 9 o'clock she was doing that, 11 o'clock she was doing that, 2 o'clock she was staggered, hardly be able to get around it, but still going down and on badly. So I said, no, I've got to get her off this treadmill. And I put her off and she went off quite happily. And then later on I read that, what was happening was they noticed in Brazil, they have these fire ants, which move in army ants that move in a colony. And they are all scent oriented because when an ant walks, it leaves scent behind so that it can go and then it can follow its own scent back. And these ants, sometimes what happens is they describe a circle and they follow their own scent round and round and round without realizing that they're going around in circles until they drop dead, which was exactly what this black ant was doing on that soap dish. Because she was following her own scent, thinking that it would lead her home or whatever it was, not realizing that she was going round and round and round in a circle. So I mean, that was because she was working by instinct. So all these things you notice. So it's and when you see them and you link them up with facts, then it becomes, wow, you've seen something happening actually.
And the best part is all of your these the discoveries is happening within the confines of your home. You're not going to some park or national park and taking taking a ride into the open to check these things. And these are
Yeah.
very they're all around us. We just have to keep our eyes and ears open.
Yeah, one doesn't need to go very far or anything like that. I mean, I envy the people who can go to, exotic locations and have great times there. That's good for them. If you can't do it, you can't do it. That's the end of the matter. Don't, I mean, beat yourself up over that. Just enjoy what's around you, and you will see a hell of a lot. Every day you'll see something new or something new. So but you have to be observed. You have to sort of be observant. That's the main thing. You have to keep your eyes open, ears open, even nose open, perhaps sometimes. But and things will happen. Things will, you will notice things.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Ranjit, we have a set of questions which was compiled by some of our students here, and these are what quick set of questions which you have to give, answers, very short and snappy answers.
Okay.
So, can I start them?
Yeah.
So, let me ask the first one.
Okay.
If you could be any character from your book for a day, which one would you be and why?
Well, I don't know. Maybe Altu Faltu the monkey. The life at times of Altu Faltu.
And why would you be that? That's also a part of the question.
Because quite because he's quite different to what I actually probably am. That's why he's quite a sort of,
Okay.
so it would be quite a
And
change, I think, to be like him.
okay. So let me ask you the second. What has been silliest idea you ever had for a book and you didn't actually write it or didn't write it? Whatever.
Pardon?
Which would you say has been the silliest idea that you ever had for a book and you decided not to write it?
Decided not to write. No, if I get a silly idea, I'll write it. I will write it. If it's not too silly, then maybe I won't write it. But if it's just like I just told you about this, the Great Poop War. Now that's a silly idea, but I wrote about it. Did a book on it, done a book on it. So if it's not, I don't like going into too serious stuff. It's okay. I have done that also, but this is more fun.
Yeah. And if you could have any superpower, what would it be and how would you use it?
That's a good question. What would I use as a superpower? Well, uh, to make sure that a lot of people, I can change the way that they think. I mean, don't like and think that they're wrecking the world. If you can change the way they think, and have that power to do that, that would be the best superpower. I mean, and it's not ordinary people. It's all these big people who are making such a mess of the world, who are screwing things up like royalty. That would be a very nice power to have. You change their mindset and make them a little more, decent.
And this is the typical question that we get asked, and I know I how which books I'll land up with one of yours. If you were stranded on a deserted island, which three books would you carry along with you?
What would I carry along with me?
Which three books would
Maybe a bottle of whiskey. Maybe a bottle of whiskey.
Yeah. But I'm asking which three books you would carry along with you.
Oh, books.
Yeah.
I would carry. Well, let's see. Well, what I like very much are those Titus books, but they're very dark, by Mervyn Peake. It's called there's a Titus, and I forgot the third one. They're huge, enough to keep you happy for about 6 months, 3 to 6 months. So that would be. Oh, I would love the William series of books by Richmond Crompton. Those are those are lovely books. So the whole bunch of 21 or whatever, I like those books with me.
Okay. And if you could co-write a book with
Those
any
would be
author,
better than
living
that,
or dead.
I think.
Okay. So my next question is,
Pardon?
if you could co-write a book with any author, living or dead, who
Oh,
would it be?
oh well, he will probably horrified, but it would be you would probably be completely horrified. You would probably say this is one attack that I've suffered recently. Co-write with this guy,
Okay.
but yes, because he changed everything. He changed everything
Yeah.
in
Okay.
literature.
Yeah. So I finally last two questions for you. Uh, if you could go back in time to and give your younger self a piece of advice about writing children's book,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Well, for children's books, simply don't moralize and don't no lectures and no moralizing, and just leave the decision to the children. What is right, what is wrong, what should be done through your do that.
Okay.
Lively.
Interesting. Yeah. And final question is, what is the funniest and the weirdest feedback you have ever received from a reader of your book?
Um, well, I don't know whether this was weird, but this was very telling about what children thought about books because I think intervals or whatever, a little boy comes up to me, he must be about 11 or whatever, and I don't know what the book was, but he opened out the page and I love your books and all that. Book in this particular sentence, you use this curse word, this bad word. So I said, yeah, but when you guys are in the playground and all that, that sort of language, curse and all the bloodies and shits or whatever it was. He said, of course we do, but this is a book. It shouldn't be in a book. So I said, okay, next time I'll be careful of what I do, how I write, keeping it right. It shouldn't be in a book. So in a way, that was sort of showed his sort of the same respect, reverence for books, that they should not have these dirty words in them. But so that has stuck in my mind for quite a while. That is really
Wonderful. Yeah. So we have received a couple of feedback from our viewers here. There's Jago Swami who has been there, since the very onset of this talk. So she said she would like to share that the weekly Down in Jungle Land is a weekly EVS lesson for me and my daughter. Thank you very much for that.
okay. Uh, no, that's fun to write, and it keeps you
Yeah,
on your toes also because you have to think of something every time, every week.
that's interesting. And there's Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj who says that wonderful to hear you on this, remembering your visit to Bangalore and learning about birds from you.
Okay, that must have been some time ago. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah. So, so you remember any of
2009.
those birds that you saw in Bangalore at that time?
I don't remember going birding as such in Bangalore. I know I went to Cubbon Park or whatever that were, saw the trees there. I don't remember doing any birding as such, but I did talk about birds. I must have lectured about birds as I do. So that must have been there.
So that's interesting because now birding has become a big thing in Bangalore. There's a group that's called BNG Birds and all. They organize these walks in
Yeah,
Lal
actually
Bagh
now
and
it's become very
yeah, so it's very interesting. Finally, Ranjit, it's been a pleasure talking to you. By one final thing, if I were to ask you, there are a lot of aspiring writers
pardon,
who are joining this thing and they want to write books on nature and all. If you
pardon.
are to give them aspiring nature writers who want to write books on nature and all, just like yourself, the advice that you'd give. Okay, I think so. There seems to be some problem. We'll just wait for 2 minutes. I'm sorry about. There seems to be some issue on connectivity. So we'll just wait for 2 minutes. So till Ranjit comes along, there have been. I would advise you to, kind of, yeah. Yes, Ranjit. So I was just going through your books. So finally, the final
Yeah.
question that was there was just like you gave you. The question was that you gave yourself advice to the kind of things that you
This is
do
playing
in
hide
your
and seek.
writing.
Hello?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me
Pardon?
now? Can you hear me at
Yeah.
this moment? Yeah. So final, the thing is, what advice would you give to aspiring young
Connection
nature
is going in
writers
and
who
off.
wish to write books? Yeah. Is it okay now, Ranjit? Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Hello?
So final,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
final word of advice to all nature writers. What advice would you give to people who want to write books on nature and everything? Just like the one advice that you were giving to yourself.
Well, one is observation and write down. Make notes. Write. Every day sit down and write. That I mean, a lot of I mean, I used to on my birding trips. Now the thing is, you're supposed to make notes in the trip to do, but I do come home and write down notes on what I observed that day on that trip, which birds were there, what they were doing, and all that. And over a period of time, you build up a whole mass of material which you can use for your writing. But you have to sit down and write if you can write every day, then there's nothing like it. It becomes like a habit. Otherwise, it's very easy to procrastinate and say, we'll do tomorrow, do day after. And you never get down to doing that. So you have to sit down and write every day. It
So
can be just one page. It doesn't have to be a huge amount.
So thank you so much, Ranjit, for that thing. So with that, I would like to,
You're
thank you for
welcome.
your spending your time with us today and taking us through a very interesting journey. Right through this thing, I've been hearing a lot of birds in your background.
Yeah, you're
From
welcome.
there's a peacock that you can kind of hear right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They make a mess in the garden. They ruin your garden. So I'm not very friendly with them.
So thanks so much, Ranjit, and pleasure talking to you. What are the books
So,
coming up? If you can tell our viewers, which are the books that they can expect from your end in the coming months or
well,
so.
one is called I think one is called Kitty Crawlies. That's non-fiction on insects, and the other one is called The Great Poop War, which is about the battle between dogs and cats, who's pooping where and why. So that's just a farcical story. It was a fun story. So that should be coming out next month, hopefully. So these are
Wonderful.
the two in the pipeline immediately.
We look forward to your books as
Okay.
ever. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone to our viewers. There were some technical issues, but I'm sure you will get a sense of what Ranjit meant and what he was speaking about. With that, I would like to end the session here. I would also like to tell you next month for our nature writing for children, we have Rajiv Aip, who's an illustrator, as a guest. We'll be talking about moving from Ranjit's text to something interesting that is illustrations. Thank you so much. Thank you again.
Thank you.